Welcome to the message recap, where we go over the previous Sunday's message. And we are in a message series called Essentials. And last week was Experience.
It was essential.
It was essential.
It was essential.
Essentially experiencing God.
Yes. Pretty simple concept is you have to have good teaching first, obviously, to know the facts and all of that stuff. But until you experience, this is true with everything in life, just everything. So the God thing fits right in. It's the same thing. We can learn about God. We need to learn the right things about God. Good doctrine's good, good theology or good accurate truth about God, and then experience that. Because everything we learn about God is just really basically simple. Everything we learn about God is really exciting, but it doesn't do us any good till we experience it. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. It doesn't matter. You can learn all about, study a trip to Europe for a 2-week vacation, learn about the stuff, learn about the history, do all that stuff. But you don't know Europe until you experience it.
You go there and actually see it.
And I think really, and I think we'd all agree, it's a part of Christianity or part of God in our lives that gets overlooked quite a bit. It seems like just as human nature, we want to learn more, and not take the time to experience, which is really weird because the value of God is God, and we miss out on the value of God just knowing about Him. Mm-hmm. Experiencing Him is fulfilling. Yep. It really is. And so it's how do we experience Him is the challenge. Mm-hmm. It is. And I think that's why we miss out so often. We are trying to experience God, what we're used to in a physical world, and He's not physical. He's spirit. So it's a little bit more difficult. It takes a little practice to do that.
And I think it's our human nature to want to do for God instead of be with God. If I'm doing more things, if I'm pleasing Him, then that makes me more right with Him. That's not the part that fulfills you. The part that fulfills you is just being in the presence of God.
Yep. And I think it's hard for us all to understand, well, what do you mean just be in His presence? I don't see Him. I don't know where He is. And it's difficult. I think what really helps is to understand that He is spirit and we are spirit. And we can connect, but we have to turn all of the noise of the physical world off. All of our physical senses need to be kind of turned off a little bit to have that one sense, our spirit. And until we experience it or try, it's hard to describe. Really, it's very hard to describe.
And I think, as somebody that's done that has experienced God, I think it's one of the easiest things we can do once we figure out what it is.
Yeah.
But it's the thing that we do the least because we think that we need to be proving to other people, how good we are and get all the things checked off of our box. And I'll get to that later. God, we'll check in later today, or forgot that, we'll do it tomorrow. But really, it truly can be one of the easiest things that we do, I think. But it's just one of the things that we just put on the to-do list for later.
Until you get into the habit, it doesn't, or until you get comfortable and you can identify what experiencing God is, it just feels like, well, this ain't accomplishing anything. Okay, I waited 12 seconds, nothing happened. So I'm going to get on to something else, Yep. How do you identify, and this is something we didn't have time to talk about, but how do you identify when you've experienced God? Because we've talked to people, all of us have over the years, of when we've had messages like this where we talk about it. I'm not sure I've ever experienced God, or I tried that, it didn't work for me, sort of thing. How do you? Because it's not goosebumps.
Nope.
It's not but that's not like an identifier of it. No. It's not always necessarily this like emotional sort of rush and tears and everything. So how do you know? I mean, maybe for all of us, but you can start. How do you know when you've experienced God's presence?
Yeah, for me, it's I actually physically feel him now. I mean, it's been years of being with him, and I can actually physically feel his presence. However, it started for me with the deepest core, first identifying the deepest core of who I am, the place in my existence, the place in my life that where fear comes from, or where security comes from. You know, those we may call them emotions, but they're deeper than an emotion. They're more solid than an emotion. But where those come from, identifying that, and then noticing that that core place of my being starts feeling. You don't go off salvation off of feelings. You know, we are because of what Jesus did. But experiencing God is definitely a feeling. It's an emotional feeling. But it's always with the character of God. That's why good teaching is very important. The character, the nature of God is completing. He is fulfilling, satisfying. And at that point in my life where I feel complete peace just take over, a peace that I've never experienced from doing anything or from other people. It's a peace that comes, that fulfills that very deepest part of my being. It's a peace that's bigger or more real, almost tangible. It's a joy that nothing ever else has brought, kind of like a pure joy like that. So for me, it's hard to describe, but I'm trying to describe that feeling that I get when I'm in the presence of God is this it's an overwhelming from the very core of my being, a satisfied, I don't need anything, or just this, nothing really matters but this. And for me, oftentimes the place could burn down where I am, and like I just wouldn't care. God is so fulfilling, nothing else seems to matter. And that, to me, that's where it's at. So as best as I can describe it, that would be how I experience, or what experiencing God is like for me.
I take it you're going to go last. Oh,
I mean, we can
okay.
go in this order if you want.
Okay.
Again,
It
everything
don't matter.
seems to be explainable through emotions.
Call the
but,
play host.
Hey,
I'm next.
have you ever been in a worship song? This is for all of us, and you don't know why, but this just tears flow from the very core of your being. There's no physical reason for it. It's this warm love that just draws you to tears. That could be described as the presence of God.
I'll go
Oh,
next.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll go next. For me, the peace one is a big one that I identify with, that there have been moments in life where I can tell a difference from before spending time with God, in a half an hour span, where I don't have peace to where I do, and nothing has changed except experiencing God's presence, So that's a big one. But you hit on the other one with that feeling of love that I experience a lot during worship songs as well. But for me, there's something different that I'll probably screw up explaining, but knowing God's love here to sensing God's love here, that is one of the key indicators for me. When I believe or experience or sense that God loves me, he sent Jesus if I would have been the only person. When I think about failures earlier in the day, and then he's like, there's this realization is probably the best word I can think of right now of God's love for me. That's more than just, for God so loved the world that he gave it, like more than information to, I just know that I know that I know that I am loved.
You just mentioned, you pointed to your brain, you mentioned when I know God's love here versus knowing God's love here. I just love to throw that word in, when I know about God's love here.
Yep.
When I know all about God's love, you don't know God's love until it's here. You just know about it.
That's probably the number one thing for me.
Okay.
Now you have to come up with something
Spoiler
different.
alert.
You did peace.
Dang.
I did love.
Hey, I did more than peace. Come on.
What
Let's
is
just
it? Peace,
secure this.
love? Joy.
patience, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness.
I just sense this
There's about 8 or
overwhelming
9 you can choose
joy.
This self-control.
Was that the order we're going in? I have this self-control that is undeniable. The peace thing was going to be obviously it's
I have a
like
gentleness about me.
gentleness,
Oh my God.
a goodness. I don't know. I can't. But it's that peace. It's almost like a switch goes off. I don't know, for me anyway. When I just get in and I start talking to God, and all of a sudden the switch goes. And sometimes I realize it happened. Sometimes I don't. And I'm already, you know what I mean? Like it. When you were talking about that, you feel the love here. It's almost like a warmth. I've had that too, where it doesn't happen every time, but the peace happens every time. But that sometimes it's almost like it's a warm feeling from the inside, and like
When I was saying about almost a physical sensation, I think that's part of it.
that's the only way I can describe. I mean, my temperature probably isn't changing, but it feels. I don't know. Yeah. So that joy and self-control. So you got whatever's left.
You get what's left.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go off.
It sounds like table scraps for like fruit. Like you get the sucky
get
fruit.
the-
Like
I know.
what?
Well, there's
get the
more than on
banana.
that list. Though. What about security?
Yeah.
What?
Are you adding one?
Yeah, he is. That's Kevin.
That was the definitive list of fruit of the spirit.
So for me, I don't get the warmth. I get chills all over my whole body. And whether it's during worship or just when I'm alone with God, I do get an overwhelming like chill throughout my whole body. And I know that that's God with me at that time, because like Dave said, like my body temperature hasn't changed. The room temperature hasn't changed. I can grab a sweatshirt and it's not going to change. And no, I'm not running a fever.
It's not COVID.
It's not COVID. It's not the flu. And sometimes it'll last for a couple minutes, and sometimes, it's 30 seconds. So it doesn't last a whole lot of time, but you know that he's there, and that just helps me to engage a little bit more than I might not. And it doesn't happen every time. It's just for me, there's no rhyme or reason of why it is, and that's what helps me know that it's God, because there is not a rhyme or reason when it comes to God, as far as I'm concerned. He loves you no matter what. We're all special.
Yep. And I liked
we
when
could at night of worship just turn the air conditioning on just a little bit more, and then when everybody gets the chills, you're gonna be like, oh.
yeah. Force the spirit to come. And that it's like I've never been a crier. We all know those people who are, and that's awesome. But yeah, a lot of times, especially lately, I don't know why, but when I'm in the presence of just tears, I don't know why. More often than it has been. Yeah, and in worship as well. Like you may not catch this, but even sometimes on Sundays, I'll be like, whoop, it's coming hard,
I think the times that I can identify more in the moment experiencing God are definitely more, I don't know a word to use besides emotional. It falls short, but I always get a little nervous too that but we're not talking about chasing an emotional experience though.
No.
And that's where I think sometimes people get caught up is, okay, well, I set aside 15 minutes and I didn't get chills. I didn't get a warmth. I didn't have this emotional high. And so what's wrong with me? Am I really saved? Does God love me as much as he loves someone else? There are times where I might not even be aware of the fact that I experienced God. But later in the day, this happens the most for me when I read the Bible, especially over the last year or two, where I read it, think about it, don't necessarily get chills or nothing, but later on in the day, I'm still pondering and thinking about it, and I sense God urging me a certain way, or I noticed I didn't use the warning lights on the dashboard. None of the warning lights popped up that day. You know, there was just I didn't have to tell myself to be less angry. Is kind of like my number one warning light for me.
Yeah.
I just noticed I was that day. So like, I don't know. We kind of all said emotional things, and like I don't want people to get the impression that it's always this emotional sort of thing.
Yeah, my big warning light is patience. I've noticed I was just more patient. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like, and it's hard to describe this, or we can't say what everybody's going to experience when they experience God, but I have a hard time thinking that we can be in the presence and connect with God in a relationship and not feel something. God gave us emotion. They're part of God himself. They're part of our spirit. Emotions are a part of our spirit.
Yep.
And emotions are from God. And like, he made us in his image with this amazing thing called emotions. Now, a lot of things can trigger those emotions, but he definitely is one of those things.
Sad
and I
piano.
So can that. I just find that
Mood lighting.
God's presence is whatever emotion I've ever felt before on steroids. It's just magnified clarity of. We've all felt love from people. We've all cried if somebody loved us or gave us something, or we saw a sacrifice for ourselves, but not like the presence of God. It's just deeper, cleaner, pure.
I know for myself, like when I was going through some health issues the past few years, and just a sense of just calmness came over me, and like I wasn't anxious and I wasn't worried about what was going to happen. Like that worry was taken away and the fear was taken away, and it wasn't like automatic, but like I know that if I hadn't been spending time with God, that it would have been elevated to a bigger level.
For sure. Yeah. We were created for this enjoyable relationship, this connection, this experiencing God and him and us. That's why humans were created. That's why God created us to have this experience with him. Oh, that's what we're going to do for eternity. We're going to be experiencing the very presence of God. I know this sounds weird. I can't explain it, but like inside and out, around, just this whole just being saturated with this presence of God is what eternity is all about. We can have that now, not as clear. We have this physical world to work through, but we can experience the same thing. And I really believe this, that, the millisecond we die, we're going to be in the presence of God. It's not going to be something that's unfamiliar. It's going to be so familiar.
It shouldn't be.
Right. If we are Christians and we are experiencing God in this world, it's just going to be clearer and more powerful, but not unfamiliar. Same God, same presence. And that's the whole benefit of being a Christian. The promises that Jesus said about us and what God will do for us, and I'll never leave you, I'll always be with you, always get you through, I'm your healer, your deliverer, all those things, is spiritually. And that's what makes a victorious life, living in this physical, broken, horrible, evil world in the presence of God is way above any circumstance this world can dish out. It's more powerful. Why? Because our spirit's really more powerful than our flesh. We just live in the flesh and everything around us, so we're so trained with that. But the spirit is even more powerful than that. That sounded weird, didn't it?
A little bit, but I was tracking.
But it's that's the way it is, But we have to. God he chose not to micromanage and control our lives. He is here with us all the time, but it is up to us to turn towards him and engage. That's where this being deliberate, intentional, I want to meet with you. Of course, I'm going to be sidetracked, of course, but with practice, I can learn how to speak another language. I can learn to connect spiritually, just like I could learn to speak Spanish if I am intentional about breaking what I'm used to doing and experiencing something different.
Right. And you brought up something in the message that I had never thought to do was put the pad of paper right. If something comes
Very
into your
helpful.
head, write it down. Get
Otherwise,
it out of your
we
head.
know what happens.
You
We're
know?
just thinking about that, and then there goes something else. And I
Yep.
mean,
and
God's
then you go down the
furthest thing
wormhole.
from-
Yeah.
Not your phone. Don't use your phone.
Don't
That's
use
a
your
bad
phone. No.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, don't put it
write
on
it down.
vibrate, really, because
Yeah.
that is the worst thing. Turn it off.
Write it down. Yeah. The value of God is God Himself.
Yep.
Spend time with
The
God.
miracles of God is God Himself. You know,
And I know we've talked before, when we encounter people that are worried that they haven't experienced it, we just need to encourage them to keep on it, keep trying.
Keep trying. Can you share your story in
Yeah.
37 seconds?
Yeah, many years ago, but I wanted to do this. I learned all about God, but I wanted to experience Him like some of the people in the Bible that were Spirit filled. New Testament, the Apostle Paul, some of the things. I wanted to do more than know God. I wanted to experience Him. So I was very deliberate. I actually went into a room. I had the whole day set aside. I went into this room and I just verbally said, God, I am here to experience, to be filled with your presence and to connect with you. And I'm not leaving till I do. And I'll tell you, it was hours. It was this daydreaming. I just struggled with, okay, God, I'm here to experience you. And, oh man, bow hunting's coming. Just like, but I mean, this is what worked for me. I was so determined. I kept saying, no, God, I'm sorry. I'm here for you. Father, I need to connect with you. I want to feel your presence. I want to feel your presence. When I sidetrack, no, Father, I'm here to feel your presence, to experience you.
Emphasis
It was
on the hours.
hours. It was, I forget now. It's been 30 years. It was 6 hours in a room. And for my story, hopefully it doesn't take you 6 hours. For my story, it was, and this is why it would have been the end. It could have been 8 hours, but I experienced God's presence in my chest, so real and so like every weight of the world was just lifted. It was just something I'd never experienced before, and it lasted about 25, 30 seconds, and then where'd it go? And so then that was it for the day. I went back the next day, did the same thing. God, I know what you're like. And it took a couple of hours to reach that point. But instead of the 25, 30 seconds, it lasted about a minute. And I don't remember the details, but this was my journey. I was deliberate about, God, I want to experience you and have your presence fill me and know you. And it was a journey of, I am going to learn how to experience you. And I stayed at it. And here's what I found, even to this day, that the more regular I do this, it's kind of cumulative. After years of doing this, now it's just Father. And I don't have to wait any time to experience God. And not only does it last the whole time I'm with Him, it even lasts after I get up and leave. I still feel His presence. But then it does fade by the end of the day. Not that He's still there and working around me, but my connection with Him seems to dissipate. That's why a regular basis is really good. I believe we can get to a place, well, I know we can. Not everybody, will get there in the same time. We can get to a place where we live totally acknowledging and experiencing the presence of God 24 hours a day. It's possible.
Yeah.
We just have to be patient and train ourselves to experience God.
And willing
How
to.
bad do we want to? Really, it comes down to that. I've read stories of Voices of the Martyrs. People, there are people in other countries that they're in prison and you know what? They're just as fulfilled and happy because the presence of God is with them. They don't care if they're in prison or not. What's the difference?
Sometimes prison might be easier to experience
Easier to experience God,
than
and
what we live in.
they have better experiences with God. Matter of fact, many of them pray for these Christians in America where they got all this worldly distractions around them. They can't connect with God.
Do you think that's why so many people in prison turn to God?
I think a lot of us turn to God, which is different than maybe experiencing God, but a lot of us turn to God when we reach something in our life that is overwhelming. Something in our life that we can't fix. A headache, we don't turn to God. We take an aspirin. You know, a loss of a job, we don't always turn to God. We'll get another one. Car breaks down, we'll get it fixed. You know, but when we face something in life, and a lot of times it's a death of a loved one, it's a sickness, it's a divorce, it's something where I can't take a pill and I can't fix this. We have a choice, and this is what we all do. We either turn to medicate ourselves, or we turn to God. Mm-hmm. And most of us find God. But here's the thing. We could turn to God before there's tragedy. Mm-hmm. But we're just so satisfied with all the stuff around.
I don't have any needs.
We're satisfied. We complain every day, but we're satisfied. Mm-hmm. If we could experience God, matter of fact, anyone who does, right then you realize nothing in this world satisfies like those moments with God. Like Greg Chester says all the time, I don't want to leave. Mm-hmm. I don't want to leave. There's nothing that offers what the presence of God does. Nothing. You know?
So it's essential.
Oh, it's so essential.
That makes it essential. All right.
Oh, one more thing.
Oh,
the Mary Martha story. Mm-hmm. We could elaborate and probably stretch that story to mean more. But wow, is that ever the American Christian, huh? I'd rather do things for God than be with God. Just a thought.
I got to get my house ready for God. Like,
well, I got to help him. I got to do this for him. I got to do this for him. Like you said earlier, give
I
me
want
10.
him to be proud of me. I want him to see how much I'm doing.
Look all I did.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what he wants? He wants you to just sit there and be with him.
There's a book by that same author that you read from called With, all about that concept. Great book. With by Skye Jethani. Great book. Just be with God.
Be with him.
Yep.
Well, now no one has to read it. We all know what it's about and where it's going.
I mean, that's basically that's the summary of it right there. But still a good read.
Yeah.
I recommend it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.